Thank you for joining me for another episode of Empower Apps. I'm your host, Leo Dion. Today, I am excited to be joined by Adam Shaw. Hey, Adam, how you doing?
Good, Leo. I'm doing good. How are you?
Good. Keeping the energy level up this WWDC week. We're recording the last day of WWDC.
hmm
Um, Before we get started, I'll let you go ahead and introduce yourself.
Okay, great. Yeah, my name is Adam. I have been an iOS developer kind of since the beginning, 2008. I started off doing kind of the indie developer thing with my own apps. That sort of transitioned eventually to contract work, but now I work full time with a team called Bonobo Labs. We make the Moleskin Studio suite of apps, specifically Time Page, a calendar app, Actions, which is a to-do list app, and Flow, which is a kind of an iPad-specific drawing app.
Yeah, that's awesome. I've heard nothing but good things about those apps, and I know our audience has. So, really glad to have you on to really tackle the iPad. We haven't had an iPad episode in forever. So, yeah, this is going to be awesome. But first of all, what's your favorite feature from WWDC 2021?
Uh, I think my favorite thing that I'm looking forward to is the async await stuff, the new features of Swift.
Yeah,
Probably more so than any other feature I can think of in a long time. It's the one that makes me just want to immediately rewrite a ton of code and be sort of eager to do it and excited to have to do it.
yeah.
It's been a while since maybe back in the day when we transitioned from manual reference counting to ARC might have been the last time I
Wow,
felt
really?
so excited to just yeah, kind of start fresh with kind of a new approach to asynchronous programming.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a while since we've had a big change in Swift like this. I mean, with Swift UI, we had the weird way we do result builders or function builders. But before that, to me, it was like the try catch stuff and the
hmm
generics like that. Those were very early big changes to Swift that were very welcome. What's your like overall game plan with upgrading your code since like this is only going to be available at least for right now on the latest OSs?
So I guess our game plan to a large extent is wait until we're able to adopt it to some degree.
Okay.
I was a little surprised. I think a lot of people were that
Yeah.
it wasn't going to be backwards compatible. I think maybe there was an assumption that because it was a language feature, or at least we thought it was purely a language
Right.
feature, that we'd be able to use it right away. I'm not sure. I suppose if we were doing another feature that was already say iOS 15 only
Mhm.
and it tied in to asynchronous programming, we
Yeah.
would, perhaps kind of just section that off as an iOS 15 only thing.
Yeah, yeah, right, and that
Yeah.
makes sense. I mean, that's kind of the way it goes with SwiftUI and a lot of the newer stuff anyways. So
Yeah. I mean,
go ahead.
oh, I say, do you have any thoughts about that? About with your apps?
No,
I'm curious to
I
get
don't.
everyone's thoughts. Like does anyone have a secret way of dealing with this that isn't just wait a year or two until you can
I don't
adopt it?
know if you've been on any of the, like, lounges on Slack, but I actually asked that
No.
question, and
Okay.
for me too, like, my concern is with Swift packages, and, like, if you're building something that as a Swift package that'll be on, like, server and client, and I wanna be using this stuff, like, what do I do then in that case? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
because I want this to be distributed, but at the same time, I want to be using these features right away since there's a lot of benefit to them. So, yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I haven't decided yet
Yeah.
what my
And
game
I
plan is.
feel like, I feel like the community would probably accept a backwards compatible version that maybe was even more limited in what you
Right.
could do. If you could just take the basic async await approach, even if you couldn't use maybe some of the advanced things. I'm not sure, but
Right. Right. Or yeah, just it doesn't have to be the most optimal thing in the world, but at least like the language feature is there, which is what we really wanted.
yeah.
So, yeah. So your experience is a lot with like building iPad apps. How do you convince a client that making an iPad app is worth it?
Uh that's a little bit of a challenge looking at it from the client perspective. Our most recent app was a app that was designed specifically to be an iPad app. It was a drawing sketching app with Apple Pencil in mind. So in that sense, it was a very easy decision. It was more of a transition to how do you support iPhone. But in general, I think nowadays, regardless of the actual market for iPad apps, I think supporting the iPad and having a decent iPad app is just simply something that the market kind of expects, just almost as a checklist item. Similar probably to maybe Apple Watch might be the same.
Okay.
Having a Mac app is starting to become more and more something that's expected. And when I say expected, I mean things that if you don't have it and you launch, you will immediately get questions. Where's the iPad app? Where's the iPad app? Where's the iPad app? And so, if nothing else, that would be the first thing I would start with. But then, depending on the app, iPad apps can obviously, in many cases, for certain types of apps, provide a better experience. You take advantage of the bigger screen. You can have more content or larger content, or a navigation flow that actually in some ways is simpler because it's flatter. You can just fit. It sounds dumb, but if you have a kind of an app that's going more for pro features, you can fit more buttons, more toolbars, more things
Right.
to kind of expose immediately. So I'd kind of start with those things. But to be honest, there are some apps where it is pretty obvious that the iPhone is the main use case and the iPad is more of a secondary nice to have, in which case you should probably still do it because I think it's expected and I think Apple likes it.
Yeah. Right.
But maybe you don't worry about it as much.
How about, so you're mentioning, excuse me, you're mentioning the difference between iPhone and iPad. How about
Mhm.
iPad and Mac? Like, why would you port a Mac app over to the iPad? Maybe port's not the right word, but
Yeah.
you know what I
No,
mean.
no, no. Well, no, I actually I do know what you mean, and that's a really good question, and it's one of the things I think people don't think about when we start talking about how come there's not more, professional or powerful apps on the iPad is the fact that if you already have an existing Mac app, it is really kind of a port, right? I mean,
Mhm.
it's similar probably an effort to porting your iOS app to Android or porting your Mac app maybe to Windows, maybe not quite that much because you can, you're still using Swift and perhaps, and you
Right.
can share some of it, but uh, it is a porting effort, and you have to decide whenever you have two apps on two different platforms. Are you going to maintain two different code bases? Are you one thing you could do is you could consider, especially if your existing Mac code base is very, very old and crusty, perhaps, and maybe you're thinking about moving to Swift UI anyway. Maybe the iPad app is the first step towards modernizing your Mac code base. So. Those are things I would think of. I should say the porting effort is kind of the thing that I think holds people back sometimes. But I guess this might be a bit of an unpopular opinion, but I think one of the reasons why you do see fewer powerful Mac apps on the iPad isn't really because the iPad isn't capable enough. I think it's been capable enough for a while. I don't think we really need to wait for more multitasking features or external display to support. I think, the reason people haven't ported their Mac apps to the iPad is because they've decided not to. And that's probably a lot because of perhaps effort and user demand. I guess there's a little bit of a chicken and egg problem, right? You don't have people demanding pro apps for the iPad because they're not currently using the iPad for pro apps because there's no pro apps for the iPad. So maybe someone has to start.
I think, like, to me, one of the biggest reasons is business reasons. Like,
Mm.
there's a there's a strange expectation that's been set for the last 10 years that apps on the iPad, along with apps on the iPhone, should cost $2 and do everything for you. And I think, like, that's one of the biggest problems is, like, Apple didn't make it easy for folks early on to build, like, really pro apps and charge really pro prices. So I think that's a big issue. Whereas with the Mac, you can kind of get away with doing your own thing. Like you're not tied to the app store.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. That's kind of my take on it.
I agree completely. And related to that, there's also an expectation, in addition to low prices now, that when you pay for an app, that you get all the platforms perhaps for free. So
Right.
there might be this expectation from Mac users that when you have an iPad version of your app, that they're just going to get it because they already quote bought your app, and that might be even less incentive to build an iPad app. Is
Right.
thinking, well, I can't if I charge separate for it, maybe my existing customers won't be happy.
Yeah. I mean, so I like the iPad. I had an iPad Pro, and then I realized I wasn't going anywhere last year for a lot of good reasons. And so it was like, why do I don't use this thing as much because I don't go a lot of places, and I ended up selling it and buying an M1 MacBook Air,
Oh,
and I I love the first like I can do everything on my MacBook Air. So for me, it was like I'd rather sell the iPad Pro and get a new MacBook Air. But like the iPad is so great at just having that like singular focus to it and using the real estate efficiently. And like you said, you got the pencil too, which is awesome. I have that too. And like the new features I added last year with Scribble. So there's like a
yeah.
lot with the iPad. And every time I hear people, oh, I wish they bring Mac OS to the iPad, I'm like, that's not exactly the best way to go. We already have the Mac. Why would we bring the Mac to the iPad? It's just that ability to focus. I don't know. What do you like so much about iPad and iPad OS?
As a user, even though I have a iPad Pro, I probably actually don't use it for very many Pro features. My iPad is my what I call my semi-portable device. You know, my Mac is more usually docked at my desk. I associate my Mac with desk work, or even if I'm going to a co-working place to work, it's portable, but it's still me sitting at a desk. And I
Mhm. Yeah.
associate iPhone with on the go, quickly pull it out of my pocket and look something up work. But I associate my iPad with portable within my house mostly.
Okay.
It's my go-to device when I want to casually browse the web or read something or check Twitter, where I know I'm going to be maybe sitting on my sofa relaxing, and I want to maybe do the things that I would normally do on my iPhone, but why not enjoy the bigger screen?
Yeah. And that makes total sense. Yeah. I had 12.9 and I have a keyboard hooked up to it and I loved it. But yeah, what size do you have?
I have the 11 inch,
Okay. Okay.
the Pro from 2018, I think.
So I guess the question then is when it comes to those different contexts and the apps that you develop, what are some of the biggest mistakes developers and designers make when they are building for the iPad?
Yeah, the most probably common mistake that you'd see from maybe a very inexperienced developer is come up with a design that works really nice on the iPhone, and then
It's
it
an
runs on the
afterthought.
iPad.
Yeah.
Yeah. They maybe you've used auto layouts and size classes, so it's not like the layout's broken on the iPad. But we've probably all seen apps where it's a big UI table view and it literally takes up the entire screen, right?
Yeah.
And that's bad because it's a bad use of space. It's also bad because it's ugly. But in the case of like the table view, it could actually be a usability problem as well. You know, you might have something in your cell where there's some primary content that's pinned to the leading edge, and some secondary content that's pinned to the trailing edge of your cell. And now on the iPad, they're 8 inches apart, and it's even hard to kind of reason about how that data is connected. So I mean, that's kind of the, I guess, how to what not to do 101. So and if you're using, hopefully if you're using some of Apple's standard things, the system will do things for you, like present things as a split view, and
Right.
but that's something that would normally just be a straight UI navigation controller. So doing things like that, deciding, I guess I'm turning this answer now into what should you do. You know, just consider other ways of navigating your app. The other thing I think is just looks always crazy to me. No matter what, UI tab controllers always look wrong on the iPad. Like even if sort of logically they
Yeah.
kind of make sense, it just always feels like there's this giant tab bar at bottom, and maybe there's 4 buttons, and when you tap them, the whole screen just goes and changes to something else.
Interesting.
Yeah,
So
I'd
what
say
do
that
you
for kind
recommend?
of well, for our own apps, we for the Moleskin suite of apps, we do a whole lot of very, very custom UI. So
Okay.
we sort of come up with very, very custom solutions for that. And it's kind of the equivalent of maybe a split view sort of thing, or the new sidebar feature, which I think was introduced last year, where you're kind of, if you really have something that normally might be in a tab view, you might consider just making all those options available on the sidebar with some other common things or lists of things that you might want to do. Also, we try to go ahead.
Are your Moleskine apps on the iPhone as well, or just the iPad?
They're all on both platforms. And Time Page and Actions were designed as iPhone apps, which we then thought about how to adapt that to the iPad, whereas Flow, which is the drawing app, it was designed with the iPad in mind, and then we had to do the reverse, which is less common, I think, is to figuring out how do you adapt something that's been designed for the iPad to the iPhone. And that was something that I think it was a little bit of an extra challenge because our minds were just not used to going in that direction.
Right. I was wondering, because I'm wondering if you use the tab bar in the iPhone versions of those apps and then use your custom control on the iPad.
No, everything in our apps is pretty much 100% custom. I don't even know if we use things like UI navigation controllers very often. We're doing a whole lot of just we do a lot of parent-child view controller things, but we're doing kind of custom presentations, custom transitions,
that's
things
awesome.
like that.
Yeah.
It's great, but it does mean that a lot of the things you might get for free from Apple for things like handling both the iPhone and the iPad paradigms, you don't get for free, and you can still handle it, but you have to kind of figure out what to do and actually implement it.
Right. So one of the things you mentioned was like putting a big giant table view on the screen, and you also mentioned changing the whole screen when you switch tabs. What are some other things to consider when you want to use that massive screen size responsibly?
I think a lot of it is So the things I talked about before were more related to navigation. You can also think about it in terms of user content, which maybe is more related to the table view. You have more screen size, so you can have more of the same size content, or you can have the same amount of larger content, and it probably depends on the situation. Like a photo viewer, you might want the photo to be full screen no matter what, because that's the whole point of taking advantage of the big screen in that sense, is getting to see your beautiful photo at higher resolution. But maybe for a photo thumbnail viewer, you might decide that it's better to see more of the smaller thumbnails on the screen at once, so you can navigate through thousands of them rather than larger thumbnails. Or maybe you split the difference. That's something that a lot of times people don't consider, I think. Say you have a collection view of thumbnails, and it's a flow layout. So maybe on the iPhone, it might be 3 columns wide by some vertical scrolling, however many you have. When you first port that to iPad, you're probably going to have the same cell size. So you're just going to have more thumbnails of the same size. And then you might say, well, what if we do the opposite? What if we keep it 3 columns, but we just make the thumbnails larger? And you could do that. But you can also go in between. You could decide that, we want slightly larger thumbnails to take advantage of seeing them a little clearer, but we don't want to only have 3 wide, because that might be not a good use of space.
Right.
The other thing I would say that's, and I'm not, I work with really great designers, but I'm not a designer, but I've learned a lot from them. And one thing that I've learned a lot about is white space and margins and things like that. And on the iPhone, a lot of times we have a tendency to want to fit things onto the smaller screen as best as we can. And so a lot of content goes edge to edge, or maybe very small margins, like 8-point margins, 10-point margins. Where on the iPad, you might try much larger, margins between things. You might try 40-point margins, 50-point margins, things that seem kind of
Yep.
comically crazy on the iPhone, but might actually just look good on the iPad. And you could say, well, Adam, isn't that wasting space? And, yes, but there is a balance, because sometimes just a little bit more spacing can add more clarity to what you're trying to do.
Exactly. Do you ever have to like do anything for like designing between like an iPad mini and a 12.9-inch Pro, like the different sizes of the iPads? Or is it pretty much like it's pretty much easy to design? Once you've designed the iPad, it's easy for any iPad size.
That's a really good question. I'd say in general, you don't have to worry about it too much, but we've definitely run into cases like that with Flow. We have this pen editor that can expand, and it's like kind of like a floating view controller in the middle of the screen. And our designers use nice big 12.9-inch iPad Pros, and they had it all nice with the spacing. And then you look at it on the iPad mini size, and it doesn't look bad, but the margins look tighter.
Right.
And
right.
I know it. And I've worked with our designers long enough that I kind of know when I'm like, oh, I'm not sure about that. And so I would just say, by the way, here's what it looks like on the smaller iPads, and they'll just tweak some spacing. Maybe bring some of the spacing or margins down a little bit for that case. Yeah. So it's not as common, but it definitely happens.
Yeah, I'd imagine. And then you find out, right when they deploy it, or right when you build it, and you're like, yeah, okay, those margins aren't going to work out so great.
Yeah.
Do you guys support multiple windows?
We do not support multiple windows currently. Okay. Flow is actually a really good candidate for it, because it is kind of a document-based app. You open your document canvas. Yeah. And when that was first announced, we were very excited about it. We actually did kind of do a proof of concept to kind of see how it would work. And it immediately started to lead to some questions for like, what do we want this experience to be? Do we want the full UI of the entire app in every window? Do we just want a new window to be just the drawable canvas document? And to be honest, I think we shelved the conversation for a little bit and then got distracted by other things. And strangely, actually, not many people have asked for it since. I think there was sort of a few requests back when iOS 13 first came out, because it was on everyone's minds, support multiple windows, but it really hasn't been something that has been that popular. So we're a little, I can't say I'm proud of the fact that we don't support multiple windows, because I know we should, but balancing priorities, it hasn't yet risen to the top.
How about when it comes to this, like building an app for different I don't know when they introduce it, but the idea of like taking up half a screen or a third of a screen and things like that.
Like the split view kind of multitasking.
Yeah. Have you done anything with that? And like, what would have been some of the challenges on that front?
Yes, all three of our apps support that. And that's actually an interesting story. Flow was designed to be an iPad app, and we knew we wanted to eventually support the iPhone, but maybe 20% of the way into development, we thought, let's just focus on the iPad. Let's just get that out, and we'll deal with the iPhone later. But maybe 2/3 of the way through development, we realized that the split view on the iPad use case was kind of important. We thought people might be sketching something that they're looking at a photo of in another app, or they're taking notes using the Apple Pencil while using another app. And then once you decide to support split view, you can't decide to just support like the regular size class widths. You have to support all the widths, which include the tall, skinny ones. Yep. And at that point, you might as well just build an iPhone, experience as well. And so that's what ended up happening. We did launch with both the iPad and the iPhone. One of the things we found, though, that's interesting, which a lot of people don't think about, is, when we think about size classes, a lot of times we do just think about the width, right? The iPhone doesn't have as much width as the iPad. Right. And when you, but a couple of things, when you split view on iPad, the skinniest splits in portrait mode, at least on my device, is actually like 320 points wide, which is actually skinnier than any of the currently shipping iPhone widths. So you're not just going to iPhone width, you're actually going a little smaller, and you have to kind of think about that. Mm-hmm. And the other thing is just the fact that it's now this weird shaped, super tall, skinny thing can just look weird no matter what. I mean, say you have a table view that maybe typically only has 12 items on it, right? On an iPhone, maybe that takes up the whole screen. Maybe that takes up half the screen. It looks fine. On a tall, skinny split view, it might only take up like the top 10% of the screen, and then you have all this white space. And there's kind of nothing you can do about that. We struggled with that a little bit, but ultimately we just decided that's okay. That the super tall, skinny, while in portrait mode on an iPad, if a user has set up their split like that, they want your app to be that size, and kind of you get what you get. Like, we don't have any split views that go horizontally, aren't that common, and I think would probably lead to a bit of user confusion, because that could be the solution, right? You think, oh, we'll do some sort of like equivalent of UI split view controller, except it'll be a horizontal split instead of a vertical split. That way you can make use of this tall vertical space. But yeah, that's something that we didn't even seriously consider. But those are things to think about when you support the split view. Is it isn't just, oh, we'll adapt the iPhone UI to this split view. I mean, maybe that's what you do, but the end result may look weirder than
even like you said, the ratios are off. Like they're considerably even more so. I can imagine. How about well, you talked already about like sketching with the pencil and things like that. What are some considerations you've made when designing for the pencil? Have you worked with like Pencil Kit, or do you just do like I'm really curious about that front.
So we have our own custom drawing engine. Our app actually was released a few months before Pencil Kit came out. Although in retrospect, our designers designed the look and feel of the pens and pencils and drawing tools to be very, very specific. And in retrospect, it actually can create a bit of a nicer drawing experience than probably what Pencil Kit would give us. But don't get me wrong, if Pencil Kit existed before we had started, we definitely might have considered it. But we use the input from the Apple Pencil, directly, and you can do that when you set up gesture recognizers and things. You can see, you can distinguish between pencil gestures and finger gestures.
So is Pencil Kit like an abstraction layer above that then that you just didn't need to take advantage of?
Right. Pencil Kit is actually, yes. Pencil Kit is it's like a drawing canvas engine. It's the way you just access things from the pencil is just more using UI touch. It's a special kind of touch.
So you guys are really getting in there and figuring out like how the pencil actually works, whereas you don't have all the niceties of that abstraction, but then you could do a lot more. Okay.
Yeah. And certainly if anyone who's thinking about supporting the pencil, I mean, if your app isn't literally a drawing app, or if the focus isn't having unique drawing features, but drawing might be part of it, or annotating, Pencil Kit is awesome. It gives you really, really high performance, very high quality drawing, and it just sort of works for free. And last year they added a bunch of new APIs in Pencil Kit that lets you even directly access the stroke data, the drawn stroke data. So you can programmatically create it, or you can access it and compare it to something, or run some analysis on it. So it has a lot of nice features, but we're just more accessing the pencil kind of in its raw data form.
Yeah. So what have you found when it comes to dealing with that? And about the hardware too. I'm really curious what's going on behind the scenes.
So there's one of my the other team member who worked mainly on Flow with me. He wrote the drawing engine, so he'd have a lot more details about that. But at a high level, you can literally just create a UI gesture recognizer and have it just give you pencil data.
Okay.
So I mean, if you do nothing, pencil, as people probably know, you can use pencil to interact with any UI by default on
Right.
the iPad.
Right.
And so in some ways you could just have an app that says, oh, I don't care if they use their finger or the pencil, we'll just use standard whatever gesture recognizer or whatever you're using, and it will work with both. We decided that we wanted slightly different behavior for both, so we distinguish when we get calls. When our gesture recognizer gets called, we look at, is this a pencil gesture or is this a finger gesture? And the reason we do things differently is we just if it's a pencil, we do want to look at things like you get data about the pressure that you're putting on the pencil, the
Right.
angle of the pencil, and we want to use that for our drawing. Also, we found that people are usually using the pencil for more precise drawing, so our default set of pen sizes is slightly different, whether you're using finger or the Apple Pencil.
That makes sense.
So, yeah, little things like that. And the other thing I mentioned, distinguishing between pencil input and finger input, is one thing it lets you do is you can use both at the same time, which is something we do in Flow. So for example, in Flow, you can have it so you are drawing with the pencil and erasing with your finger. Or we have another mode where if you do a long press with your finger, it will switch the drawing mode that you're using with your pencil. So you can kind of take advantage of that and really actually do things that would be impossible otherwise without the Apple Pencil.
That's awesome. Because yeah, I mean that's the power of the pencils, being able to do more
Yeah.
precise stuff. So I want to talk about, I guess, the two other pieces of, I don't want to call it hardware support, that's been more emphasized
Yeah.
by Apple, and that's the keyboard and the pointer. We don't call it the mouse, we call it the pointer. Hey, what have you done in those spaces, and do you see how do you see how it's changed the way the iPad is used and developed for?
Mm-hmm. In our specific apps, we haven't done much other than just make sure that our app is highly usable with those things, because by default, you can use the pointer to kind of click on anything you would normally tap on. I guess is it click now with the pointer? I forget if we're supposed to use the word tap,
Yeah, exactly.
tap or click or touch or interact with. Same with the keyboard.
Do you do any keyboard shortcuts?
We do a limited number of keyboard shortcuts. Yeah.
Okay.
And I think all we do actually right now, because our apps are kind of considered a suite of apps, we have some shortcuts for quickly switching between the apps.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, because we can still use the URL schemes to launch each other's apps.
Right.
So that's what we sort of started with, and then I think I haven't done that. I'm not the person on our team who did that work, but I think there's we support kind of just the standard basic ones you would expect, like the cut, copy, paste, that kind of thing. But we haven't done a lot of custom power user sort of things. It's sort of it's something I thought about though more preparing for this interview, because one thing that occurred to me was, even if you might look at your own app as we have and say, is our app really the type of app that people are, using docked with a keyboard and trackpad?
Right, especially if you're doing like with Flow, it sounds like it's a lot of sketching and stuff like that too.
Yes. But then I started thinking, well, maybe that doesn't matter. Maybe you don't think of it that way. Maybe think of it as, is my app an app that someone might use in split view side by side with another app that is a professional app that they do want to use with keyboard and mouse, and now they don't want to suddenly switch between keyboard and trackpad and their finger just because they're thinking about two different apps, that you want to almost be a good app citizen.
Right.
So even if there's not a lot of compelling reasons for you to support it in your own app, know that your app might be used side by side with an app that's the person is thinking in keyboard and trackpad mode.
Right. Like the one thing I wanted to play around with actually before we chatted was universal control. And I was like super disappointed it's not in beta 1 yet.
Isn't it? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah. I was like, okay, I'm dragging my mouse on my Mac. Why is it not going to the iPad? And it's like, oh, it's not in there.
What do you think about that in general? My initial reaction was, that's very weird, and I don't know yet how I feel
I
about it.
I'm curious to see if it's better than me using Sidecar. That's why I want to
Okay.
try it. So I use Sidecar quite a bit with my MacBook Air, and I have a fifth
Hmm.
gen iPad, I believe, just regular iPad. So that's nice to have that extra screen. But there's things
Yeah.
like I can't do put it in portrait mode, and there's also things that like I don't really need the Mac screen. I just need to pull up a browser to read something, and it'd be nice to
Yeah, yeah,
control
yeah.
that all with one device. So yeah. So now the next feature you need to implement is that you support a Wacom tablet, and then that way, like, you made the full circle of like hardware compatibility, where it's
There
like,
you go.
oh, good, now you could draw with a mouse on a Wacom tablet on an iPad, even though you probably should just use a pencil, honestly. Uh, if you did you ever use any of those?
Oh, I think back when they first came out and they were really, really terrible, but still better than
Yes.
anything else. But no, not any of
Yeah.
the more recent modern ones that have actual screens,
Yeah,
LCD screens
right.
or anything like that.
Yeah, we've come a long way from that. Um, so what's we kind of touched on it, but is there any like OS feature that you feel like they need to add in order to make the iPad more pro? Or do you kind of like go back and say, yeah, it's kind of a business issue more than it's anything else? It certainly isn't
Yeah,
hardware.
yeah. Right, right, right. Yeah, yeah. I mean, there's a lot of things they could. I mean, I think although there's these things we talked about that maybe are not necessarily prerequisites for having pro apps on the iPad, I do agree it's mostly business reasons. There's still some sort of nice things that you would eventually like having a solution for external monitors that is can be used not like that the app doesn't have to have specifically support, but kind of
Right.
like the idea of having like multiple screens. I think about what it would take for me to
Use it in
want to
dock
use
mode.
yeah for
Yeah,
me
I was gonna say
for
that.
my own work. And the answer is always, well, okay, I would need I would need keyboard and pointer. I would need and when I'm talking about work mode, I'm talking about like, professional software development mode. And it's like, well, I would want multiple external displays, and I would want, probably on the software side, things like maybe you can get away with, maybe they can come up with solutions where I don't need terminal. But I feel currently in my software development life, I use terminal all the time. And not just as a convenience or an inconvenience, but, there's some things I run that require it. So
I think for
I'm not
me,
sure.
like when I was doing, I would use the iPad Pro pretty much for writing and like businessy stuff. I actually like that the iPad I can't do software development on because then it's like a distraction when I need to get other stuff done. Um, but then like a lot of what I write about is going to be about software development. So I want to pull up code and copy it into my blog post, or I need to copy an image or something like that. And just like that cross communication on the iPad
Yeah.
is really painful compared with like how easy it is on the Mac. Like I don't need to pull up a share sheet every time I want to do something. And yeah, we got drag and drop and stuff like that, but it's still like, and so I'm curious to play around with that in iPad OS 15, like, and see how much that's improved. I do like the little ellipsis at the top. Like, I think that's going to help a lot of people, but like, to me, that's always been the biggest issue technically is like the cross app communication is not as easy of a flow as I
Right.
find it on the Mac.
Right. Right. And you have to decide for your, professional work, you always have to decide how much of a productivity hit am I willing to take to
Yeah.
try something new. And maybe you're willing to go for it, even if you could be 90% productive. Maybe say, yeah, the 10% will come later.
Right.
But I think now for a lot of people, like for myself, it would probably be even if you had, let's say, we can talk about Swift Playgrounds in a bit, but even if you had full blown Xcode on the iPad, I still feel like today I wouldn't. I feel maybe I could be 50% as productive as
Right.
I am now, and that's just so it'd be more of a novelty than anything else. Yeah,
So yeah, let's talk about it. Swift
yeah.
Playgrounds. What do you think?
I think
We don't have it in front of
I
our hands right now, so
I
it's a little
know.
bit hard to say until you actually try it. But yeah, go ahead.
I think it's cool. I mean, I was never someone who thought I can't wait for
Yeah.
Xcode on the iPad and I'm going to
Yeah.
use
Same here.
it. But certainly I'll play around with it. I think it's an interesting novelty. I think it could turn into something more. And I'm not against the fact that I might find some use cases where I actually can use it for productive work under certain circumstances. But, I was never someone that just thought like, what is it? There's a thing people say like, oh, it's not a real computer unless you can develop code on it for it. And I don't get me wrong, that's totally fine to be able to do that, but I don't consider that a prerequisite for something being a real computer. I think
Right.
it's totally fine for software development to be on a different platform. And I don't know, but I definitely want to play around with it, see how it
Yeah.
works,
Same
because
here.
it's another good example. We talked about how
That's what I was gonna say.
do you make pro
Yeah.
apps for the iPad, and Apple does provide good examples of
I think.
how to manage that complexity sometimes.
Yeah, I think it's like a good. It's going to be interesting for me. Like, besides like being able to build an app on the iPad, I think it'll be an interesting template to see how, if this is the guidance that they follow when, and I think they will eventually move stuff like Final Cut Pro or Logic
Mhm.
or any of their other applications over to the iPad, because then it's like, okay, now they have a pattern of, okay, there's Xcode to Swift Playground. This is Final Cut Pro on the Mac. This is Final Cut Pro on the iPad. And I think that'll be super interesting to see how they follow that pattern, that template in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah. And in some ways, maybe it jumpstarts the chicken and egg problem. The more pro apps that Apple makes on the iPad, the more people
Right.
start to use it in those cases.
I was
Therefore,
honestly
the more demand for
surprised.
other apps.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised that it was Swift Playgrounds. That's their first like pro app. I was thinking that they were going to more release like an audio editor or like I
Yeah,
mean, besides GarageBand, but like a Logic Pro or a Final Cut Pro besides iMovie
yeah.
to over to the iPad. And like I was thinking that was the route that they were going to go. I wasn't thinking like Swift Playgrounds was going to be their first precedent in that space. So yeah, the other thing I thought was cool, I found this out yesterday, was that like Swift packages is kind of the basis for the quote unquote Swift Playground projects. So
Oh,
they're not
okay.
actually Xcode projects, they're Swift packages. And I'd be really cool to like deep dive into that and to see how that works behind the scenes, because I'm a big Swift package fan.
Okay. Yeah. That's cool. That's cool. Yeah. It's I was hoping that when they announced that, they'd say, oh, out later this year. But what it sounds like is it next year that Swift Playgrounds?
Is it? They don't even have
I
a beta on the site, so
I don't even remember.
who knows?
I think they said next year.
There's a lot of stuff, Xcode Cloud included, that like isn't out yet. That's later this year.
A week before next year's WWDC, they're gonna release it.
As soon as we get those MacBook Pro, those Apple Silicon MacBook Pros, whenever that'll happen.
Yeah. Now we're talking.
Any other thoughts on like the future of iPadOS or iPad development?
Nothing specific. I think it is moving. I think iPadOS is moving in the right direction. I think people sometimes get frustrated that Apple isn't providing all the solutions that everyone wants all in any particular year. But I think it makes sense that they're being slow and careful. And we'll see. I mean, I don't think that I don't think Apple doesn't care. I think Apple has shown that they care about this. They're aware of the more professional power user needs, and they want to get there, but they also it's still based on iOS, right? It's still iOS-y, and they still, my mother uses her iPad all the time. She is deathly afraid of the Mac. She doesn't understand it, but she loves her iPad. And the only time she needs help with it is when she does things like accidentally put it in split view mode, multitasking mode, which she doesn't care anything about. And so you have to, you still have to make, just, I guess, casual users happy too, because it really fulfills a good casual computing need for a whole lot of people.
Any favorite talks from this year that you've watched?
Oh, it's been a whirlwind. No, I don't have a good answer for that. There's plenty of talks that I liked, but now that I'm trying to like picture the talk and the person and I'm kind of drawing a blank.
Any concept? I guess the async await stuff. That's been pretty cool.
I like that. I mean, I'm really looking forward to that. I have not been using a lot of Swift UI, but I have started to do some new side projects on Swift UI, and they're more focused on the Mac. And I have run into some of the hard edges that is Swift UI on the Mac, and it sounds like from the things I've watched that they've made some progress there this year that I'm excited about, and that if nothing else, that Apple has made non-trivial system apps with Swift UI, which I think is hugely encouraging. So
my plan after this, honestly, is to go through. They have a couple of talks with code alongs on Swift UI on the Mac, and I want to go through those today because I'm in the same boat where it's like I want to build Mac apps with Swift UI, and it's like you run into it becomes an uphill battle. I even had a really good design lab where the guy's like I'm not I'm a design person, but it was great. Those labs are awesome. I highly recommend people take advantage of them. But yeah, like I'm hoping that they are going to encourage more Swift UI, and it sounds like they're using it themselves, which is great on the Mac.
Yeah, that's hugely important because I think it's not even features, but just weird edge cases that you sometimes you even think like, how could anyone not have noticed this crazy bug? And hopefully at least those level of obvious issues will be noticed earlier by Apple internally.
Well, thank you so much, Adam, for coming on the show. It was really great to have you on.
Well, thank you, Leo, for having me. It was a great talk. Thank you.
Where can people find you online?
On Twitter, I'm at KabukiVision, KabukiVision, and that's the main place, I guess. I don't really have a personal website.
Well, thank you so much. People can find me on Twitter at LeoGDion. I'm on, my company is Bright Digit. Please take some time to fill out our 2021 audience survey if you could. Links in the show notes. And also, if you're watching this on YouTube, please like and subscribe. Or if you're on Apple Podcast, Spotify, Google Podcasts, wherever, we could use a review. If you have any other feedback, feel free to reach out to me on Twitter or email. Thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you again. Bye.